Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Mike from Rapport, and I'm here to introduce our third webinar in our week-long festival events, brought to you in partnership with JCDecaux. Yesterday, we were joined by our guest speaker, Mike Follett from Lumen, who argued that there was a need to place greater focus on attention as a metric in advertising. Quite simply, if our advertising doesn't attract attention, it can't work. He proved that the longer people spend looking at ads, the more memorable they become and the more action people will take. Yet attention isn't solely driven by the creative. Not all media is created equally. The context in which an ad is consumed, along with how well it's been targeted, was shown to play a significant role in driving attention. And the well-established media multiplier effect also showed up again as we explored the power of combining public and private media. Mike showed us that digital out-of-home screens primed mobile ads, magnifying the attention generated on mobile, driving recall and aiding message takeout. So today's session extends that theme further, the two-screen future. We'll be hearing today from the Rapport and JCDecaux Insight teams, Jack and George, who'll be again exploring the combination of public media, the digital out-of-home screen, working with the private media, our mobile devices. Before I hand over to Jack, just to note that we do have a Q&A function available today. However, conscious of your time, we propose bringing in any broader questions that may arise into our panel discussion on Friday. Whilst anything specific, we will get back to you directly. So now I will hand over to Jack.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everybody. I'm Jack Monaghan, and I work in the Rapport Marketing and Insight team. I'm joined today by the lovely George Kelly, who works in Insight at JCDecaux. And today we'll be building on the themes laid out in Monday's and Tuesday's sessions, further exploring the combination of public and private media, out of home and mobile, the two-screen future. Next slide, please. We'll be starting off by framing this growing opportunity. Taking a closer look at the changing media landscape. If you can go forward one more, please, George. The important role that out-of-home plays and how it's able to complement the role of mobile. Ultimately, trying to show you why digital out-of-home is already perfectly poised to take advantage of this opportunity. We'll then briefly revisit the excellent JCDecaux and Lumen 2+2=5 research that was presented in yesterday's session to show, from a theoretical perspective, how digital out-of-home is able to drive increased mobile effectiveness through higher engagement. I'll then pass over to George, who will be taking us through some real-world brand examples, putting this theory to the test to prove that the digital out-of-home mobile combination is the perfect opportunity and drives better outcomes throughout the brand funnel. He'll be presenting an excellent new measurement approach developed by Decaux and On-Device, tipped to win big at the MRS Awards, and offering up the opportunity for you to put the two-screen future to the test with your brands. Finally, he'll take you through some of the findings of their sentiment tracker to show that now is indeed the time to get back into outdoor and take advantage of what the public screen has to offer. So, without further ado, let's take it away. People are currently, one more please, George. People are currently spending a disproportionate amount of time on social media. Touchpoints data from the IPA shows that the average UK adult spends almost a quarter of their weekly commercial media time on social channels. And this figure rises to almost 40% for 18 to 34-year-olds, an increase of 70%. Now, this figure has likely risen across the board over the past year, as we spent more time locked up in our homes, even in the absence of all the glamorous holiday photos that we would normally scroll past. And the pandemic has seen an acceleration of ad expenditure moving into online, accelerating the structural changes that we've seen in the UK and global advertising markets over the past years. Data from WARC in 2020 and 2021 has shown that online increased its market share by 7% in 2020. Private media winning market share largely at the expense of the public broadcasting channels such as TV, outdoor, press and radio. And it will come as no big surprise that the two biggest winners have been the two tech giants, Facebook and Google, with Facebook increasing its market share by a whopping 4%, from 16 to 20%. Now, with all these changes in the media landscape, the balance between brand and activation will only become more apparent and more important as we edge towards the new different. Another significant trend from the pandemic has been the growth in e-commerce, which alongside the growth of social has accelerated the focus on activation and the bottom end of the funnel, ultimately focusing heavily on conversion. But despite this, brands still need to work on driving brand awareness, ultimately making their activation activity work harder. By doing digital out of home and mobile in conjunction, you can push consumers through the funnel faster and ultimately drive more revenue. And here's an example of digital out of home and mobile doing exactly that, driving consumers through the brand funnel faster by utilizing a combined digital out of home and mobile approach, ultimately driving an increase in sales. In this JCDecaux study for Purcell, EPOS data was used to measure the incremental impact of adding mobile to digital out of home. So by matching Tesco stores into 3 groups based on historical sales of the Purcell product, one without activity, one with just the Tesco point of sale activity, and one with the point of sale and mobile, we're able to isolate the impact of digital out of home and then the incremental impact of adding mobile. Throughout the campaign, stores supported with the point of sale digital out of home were found to increase sales by a massive 18%. But when this was combined with mobile, sales grew by an additional 9%. And we have another EPOS example here for Borsan, this time moving away from looking at the incremental effect of mobile and digital out of home, but this time looking at the effect of adding point of sale digital out of home at Waitrose screens on top of a national social campaign. So across the 12-week campaign, stores with the point of sale digital out of home reported a 10% increase in sales versus those where just the social activity was running. So we've seen the incremental impact of adding mobiles digital out of home. We've seen the incremental impact of adding digital out of home to mobile and social. But we're not the only ones saying this. Facebook are also keen to demonstrate the incremental impact that out of home has on the effectiveness of its own product. In a test run in France for Danone, Facebook looked to investigate the impact of combining Facebook advertising with out of home. Whilst you would normally expect a multiplier effect when using 2 channels, as higher investment does lead to a greater impact up to a point, the integration of Facebook and digital out of home exceeded these expectations. Purchase intent increased by an additional 13% above and beyond what would have been expected, ultimately leading to an additional 6% in reported sales. To take this back to the public and private, it's a case of the public out of home screens driving awareness, followed by the private screens targeting consumers one-to-one and building from this awareness. So we've seen the combination of digital out of home and mobile presents a real attractive opportunity for brands. But is this an opportunity that is currently able to be realized easily and at scale? The answer is yes. Ultimately, there is no creative barrier between digital out of home and mobile that would require any extra assets and designs. According to Root data, 92% of weekly digital out of home impacts are across only 4 different aspect ratios, 3 of which are standard online formats. We've got the 9:16, which accounts for 81% of all weekly impressions, and it's the same as a standard social story form advert. The 2:1 is a YouTube pre-roll, and the 4:1 is a banner ad, traditional banner ad. If the creatives have been made for social, then they can also be delivered across digital out of home, making the social work harder as a result. It's a no-brainer. So we've seen that there's a clear opportunity here to utilize digital out of home alongside mobile, leveraging the effects on brand awareness and perceptions that the public screen provides to make ad investment on private screens go further. And indeed, from the EPOS and Facebook studies we've gone through so far, the synergies of the 2-screen future are clear from the perspective of driving sales. But we're keen to examine how exactly these 2 channels work together to actually create these synergies. How does the combination of digital out of home and mobile drive people through the brand funnel faster? So to try and begin answering these questions, JCDecaux teamed up with Lumen, an attention technology company, aiming to understand the role that digital out of home exposure has on engagement with mobile advertising. In yesterday's session, Chris Felton and Mike Follett took us through the attention economy and the full 2+2=5 study in all its brilliance, so we won't spend too much time going through it again today. Essentially, Lumen used eye tracking technology embedded in the webcams of computers and mobile phone selfie cameras to track the share of attention spent by consumers on advertising, predominantly in situ online advertising. But by adapting this methodology to show respondents a video of the Birmingham Bullring shopping mall, under the premise that these respondents were taking part in a retail survey, JCDecaux and Lumen were able to analyse the amount of time respondents focused on digital out-of-home advertising using eye tracking, using a Hollywood digital effects company to artificially insert different ads into the scene. 600 respondents were recruited to watch the mall video, after which they were told to scroll through Facebook and Instagram on their phones as they normally would. With their consent and using special technology that enables Lumen to insert ads into respondents' typical social feeds, so alongside all these glamorous holiday photos, the respondents' attention was once again tracked, this time measuring their engagement with social ads. But in this case, some of them corresponded with the digital out-of-home ads in the mall video. And here are the results. The average dwell time across the digital out-of-home adverts tested was 2 seconds, so roughly the same as the mobile creative in isolation. And for context here, Facebook report that their average dwell time is between 1.7 to 2 seconds, so largely in line with the findings of Decaux and Lumen here. However, when respondents were shown a mobile ad that corresponded with a digital out-of-home ad they'd been exposed to in the video, dwell time on the mobile ad increased 3 seconds, a 50% increase in mobile dwell time and an overall increase of 21% above what would have been expected. In other words, 2+2=5, the digital out-of-home amplification effect. So what does this increasing in engagement really mean? Well, I'm finding it quite hard to say that word engagement. Well, ultimately, attention is rare, and the longer you look at an ad, the more likely it is to work. Respondents were surveyed after the eye tracking study to assess recall and message takeout. Those that viewed the digital out-of-home as well as the mobile ad were not only more likely to have better understood the messaging, but were more than twice as likely to recall the advertising than those who only saw the mobile ad. So we now know that digital out-of-home amplifies mobile, increasing engagement and ultimately leading to greater recall. But how does this translate into the real world and on the various elements of the brand purchase funnel that we went through earlier on? And for that, I'll be handing over to George.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack. That was excellent. And yeah, picking up on those themes, I think in this section, it's really important to kind of bear in mind what Jack really just took us through there. So reflecting on the learnings from the theory-based eye tracking research that we conducted with Lumen. And we're very much accepting that it is a theory-based piece of research that we conducted there. And what we wanted to do and what we have done is really bring this into the real world, because we appreciate that asking someone to watch a video in a mall and then asking someone to go on their mobile phone, albeit we're not telling them the reasons why, that is a slightly contrived way of researching this. Not to undermine the research, the fundamentals of the research are valid and important, but what's great now is that we have the ability to bring this into the real world and measure campaigns that exist on our high streets and exist on social platforms as well. So with that in mind, we have a couple of new, one that you may have seen before, one that you certainly haven't seen before. We've got a couple of studies to kind of go through, but before we go through that, we have a lovely video for you that kind of really brings to life the research offering. And also, it's going to do a far better job than I can of articulating the research methodology. So this research methodology is MRS shortlisted. It's through on-device and is using passive media tracking. And we've called it the two-screen capture. So without further ado, I will share the video.
At JCDecaux, we've worked with mobile technology research experts on device to provide a test and learn capture product to make this possible. We are providing an independent product that measures the impact of digital out of home mobile advertising and both media combined. We've called it the two-screen capture. On-Device are experts in passive media exposure research. Pioneering technology enables them to monitor social media exposure in an environment that exactly mimics respondents' social media feeds. Respondents log onto their personal social media accounts within On-Device's Curious Cat app. Their social media feeds look just like they always do, but On-Device are in control of the advertising served. Exposure to ads in this environment is as natural as it gets. Digital out-of-home exposure is identified via mobile data. Handsets are tracked using passive GPS signals to create an accurate picture of where the audience is and when. This is matched against the location of out-of-home media inventory and the time the test advertising was running to identify the exposed group. By cross-referencing respondent device IDs, On-Device can identify which group is exposed to digital out-of-home, which group is exposed to advertising within their social media feeds, and which group has had the opportunity to see both. Brand impact surveys are then served to each group. These surveys cover key success metrics throughout the brand funnel, including brand sentiment, consideration, and purchase intent. So the two-screen capture helps brands understand how the public screen and the private screen can work for you. It's a test and learn product with actionable, transparent results. Do you want to capture the future?
Okay, great. Rather provocative question there at the end, which is always a good way to end a video. Hopefully you all want to capture the future after that. Just to kind of summarize what that methodology allows us to do in really simple terms, is essentially we can identify sample groups based on passive media exposure. So there's a real strength in that, in the sense that it is passive. You're not tasking someone to consume the advertisements. They are doing that naturally in their day-to-day lives, and that's why there's a real strength in the methodology and in the passive nature of that. What it allows us to do is, as I said, is it allows us to identify sample groups. So we've got a control group where we can assume that they have not been exposed to any of the advertising, whether that be digital out-of-home or mobile. We then have a group of people or respondents who would have been within the vicinity of where the digital out-of-home was playing. So we know that they've had the opportunity to see that campaign. Similarly as well, through On-Device's panel and through the integrated social channels within their panel, whether that be on Instagram, Facebook, we can even do Twitter, we can do YouTube, whatever that may be, we can then have a group of people who've had the opportunity to see that corresponding ad. And then also what's most important here as well is we're then getting that kind of dual media exposure group. So people who've been exposed to both media types within that kind of real world scenario. So I'm going to go through a couple of case studies that we've actually done this for in the real life. What we're looking at when we're looking at the metrics, you'll see some percentage uplifts. So what we're looking at specifically is the difference in mobile versus control versus the uplift of digital out-of-home and mobile versus control. So we're basically understanding what digital out-of-home is adding to an existing mobile advertising strategy. So we've just picked out those metrics. Obviously, there are kind of more detailed versions of each of the case studies that we can go through at a later date, but we've just picked out the most pertinent points in terms of that performance of digital out-of-home and mobile versus control versus mobile versus control. So really just getting under the skin of what digital out-of-home can add. So the first example we've got is for British Gas. So just to give you some background on the British Gas campaign, this was what seems like years ago now, but it was pre-pandemic, and it was actually only in February last year, but that was kind of before we got into this mess, shall we say. But yeah, just before we went into lockdown in February 2020, British Gas did a really brilliant campaign with us and also using social channels. The campaign was called Here to Solve, And it was a really great piece of creative execution. So they really tapped into relevant moments throughout the week. So they did kind of things on people's commute times, really kind of family orientated moments. They also had some kind of weekend messaging around activities at the weekend. And it was all about kind of British Gas wanting to put an arm around consumers and make that brand feel really trusted. The inventory that they used to do so, this was a London campaign only, so they used London termini stations and also activated in both Westfield malls. And the assets that they used on the D6s, the 9:16 aspect ratio for digital out of home, was also the same assets that they were using on their social channels on Instagram and Facebook. So the metrics you can see across the brand funnel, look at what digital out of home adds to British Gas's social advertising channel. Specifically for this, we were looking at the performance of digital out of home and Facebook for the purposes of the research. What you can see, if we just go through the results very simply, significant movement of British Gas for awareness. So really digital out of home and mobile working together to great effect to drive awareness, more so than the mobile advertising strategy on its own. And if you think about an increase of 10% for awareness of British Gas, I mean, British Gas is a household name. We all know of British Gas. It's quite a low interest category, it's fair to say as well. I don't know about you, but I don't get up every day and start thinking about my utility bills. Only when they come around and they're getting a bit more expensive, I might think about them. But to see a shift in movement there of 10% for British Gas is really, really strong. Similarly as well, we've got really strong results for perceptions. And the reason why that metric is perhaps so high in terms of that movement of 100% is really down to the strength of the creative used. And again, those creative assets being used across those both mediums. It really was a brand centric campaign, this, and that was at the core of the campaign. And to see that coming through in those positive perceptions of British Gas as a brand for the two media was a really strong result. Then we moved down the funnel and into consideration. And this for British Gas was the overriding objective. They wanted to increase consideration. And what we found is that by doing those two things together, you're much more likely to achieve that consideration metric. You can see there's a movement again, almost mirroring that awareness. So people are becoming aware of it, and they're also actually becoming much more likely to consider that. That consideration question as well is a single choice 6-point question. And what we've done is we've then grouped the 3 positive suggestions of consideration. So that would be the only one I'd consider, would consider amongst others, and would consider amongst a few others. I think the consider amongst others is the most important when you're thinking about utilities, because you're very unlikely to kind of just put all your eggs in one basket, to kind of quote Love Island there, but you're very unlikely to put all your eggs in one basket on a utility brand. So that consideration metric across the 3 to be driven by 10% was again really, really powerful, and really went down well with British Gas when this was presented back to them. Ultimately, what that all leads to is some really positive results at the bottom end of the funnel. So what we're talking about there is kind of conversion, and that's going to be so important for brands going forward. Everyone is feeling the pinch at the moment. Businesses are feeling the pinch. So to try and prove conversion, prove ROI, that's something that is a challenge within out of home, and that's absolutely fair. But what we found with this is when doing those two things together, you're kind of getting the most out of both media. That one-to-many and one-to-one really working well together, and actually driving people to switch to British Gas as their energy provider. So that's gone up by 20%. Really strong result again for them. So overall, very successful campaign. That is a snapshot of some of the findings. Obviously, there's much more that we could go into, but that's what we wanted to share with you today. And then secondly, we have a new case study that was for Candy Crush. So this was slightly more recent. What's really nice is we've got kind of a pre-pandemic case study and a kind of, I say post, we're still in the pandemic, but a post kind of lockdown case study here. So this was a campaign for Candy Crush, the gaming app that many of us will know and love. And this was done in September and October last year. So they had a 2-week campaign. Again, this was a London only campaign, or London focused campaign rather, and they ran predominantly on roadside and also had some rail and some malls inventory within that. The campaign was promoting their All Stars tournament, and they had various famous celebrities and influencers kind of across multiple creatives. Similarly, again, the creative assets used for digital out of home were in essence the same for social. However, the social assets also had some audio to support. So there's a slight difference there in the sense that they had a slight extra audio element to the creatives and a bit more animation. Obviously, we have some limitations with the animation we can do on roadside, but in essence, the core creative principles were the same across both mediums again. And what's great to kind of get across with this, even though this was in September and October, and we kind of weren't really sure what was going on with coronavirus, people were at that time still going outdoors and still consuming that advertising, and people were also very much still consuming their private media by going onto their social channels, going onto their mobile phone. And what we see here is the results of that campaign coming through. Again, looking at the performance of digital out of home and mobile versus mobile, and what those results are. So awareness of the event, and what we mean by the event is the tournament that was taking place. That's gone up a massive 90%. So obviously this was a new event, so that's why that's quite a large number, but still we're looking at performance of the two media here versus one media group. That's driven awareness by an additional 90%, so really strong result there. Perceptions of Candy Crush as a brand, so that would be things, when we talk about perceptions, that would be things like current, exciting, something you want to get involved in, forward thinking, etc., etc. All these perceptions, positive perceptions of the app and the tournament have really come through there and have gone up by a 30% increase there. Consideration, so I talked about the question we used for British Gas. We used a similar style question where we used a 6-point single choice question, but what we're looking at here is exclusive, so the only one I'd choose, because this is a highly competitive market that you are more likely to then have much more favorability to one particular app. Certainly within the gaming market, it's kind of you use maybe one or two or just one, but you're very unlikely to kind of use a spread, and Candy Crush were really keen to understand exclusivity on that consideration. And what's great is that we demonstrated a positive result for that, again going up by 20%. And then finally as well, obviously kind of the bread and butter for any kind of app-based product, are you more likely to download it? Are you more likely to get involved? I think a key thing for this was, for Candy Crush, was to actually engage some dormant users, so people who had the app but had deleted the app, to get it to re-download. And what we've seen there is a really strong result of app downloads for that media group who were exposed to both channels in terms of out of home and mobile. So hopefully two compelling arguments there in terms of the real world, applying the theory-based learnings from the Lumen study that Jack so eloquently took us through, and then applying this into the real world and bringing this to life and actually demonstrating that this is the right thing and a good thing to do for brands. So just to sum up that section, we very much are keen to work with Rapport, and this is an active test and learn opportunity. That's something you're going to hear a lot from us in the next year or so. Test and learn is a big thing for us. And one of the kind of cornerstones of that test and learn program is the 2-screen capture. So the 2-screen capture would have been that video that you just saw. Essentially, what we've got here in extremely simple terms is that checklist. If you are planning digital out of home and mobile and using the same or similar creative assets, then please do reach out to us, as we can offer similar research to what you have just seen. We can offer the on-device research, or we could maybe have a conversation around how we could do a slightly different approach for a slightly smaller campaign. If you were to pursue the on-device approach, there is a caveat in the sense that we would need to have a sufficient coverage for the digital out of home element. So that would require around about 20% UK reach or 40% London reach. Now, the reasons for this is for research purposes, and it's so that we are able and confident to achieve sufficient sample sizes with the passive media tracking approach. Anything lower than that, and the sample becomes quite volatile and quite hard to ascertain where people have been. So that's why we ask for that kind of 20% UK or 40% London. If you tick that box and you're doing mobile and you've got the similar creative assets, then please do get in touch, and we'd love to kind of engage in conversation about how we can help with that. So moving on to relevance. So we really wanted to bring this up to the here and now. And to do so, we ran some bespoke research just last month to understand the sentiment right now within the UK. So this is titled The Great British Switch Off, which is a real marketing win there. That's a fantastic title. And what we found from our sentiment tracker is, as you can see on the stats on the screen there, 3 in 4 admit to spending too much time looking at their screen, which is staggering, but kind of believable as well. I mean, a lot of people are fatigued. 18 to 34s as well, so that age group, that demographic, that are probably more entitled or more likely to be going outdoors. They're actually much more likely to be bored of social networks as well, by 18%. Londoners are 23% more likely versus the national average to have run out of content to watch online. So they've obviously been binge watching Netflix and Amazon Prime, and rightly so, because we haven't had a lot to do. But I think there's a kind of turn in the tide here where people are just really keen to kind of move away from that private media and get back outdoors again and enjoy the things they like to do. 1 in 3 people as well have actually been able to save more during the pandemic. So there's going to be an influx of money that is going to go back into the high streets. It's going to go back into hospitality. It's going to go back into retail. So that's really, really good news for advertisers, and also to kind of set up that premise of digital out of home as a medium. And 3 in 5 plan to spend as much time out of home as possible as well. I mean, we've obviously been locked up for 2 or 3 months at the start of this year. The weather's starting to turn just about. We're getting there. It's getting warmer. We can sit in pubs as of Monday. So people are very much keen to get outdoors, and that's great news for us as an outdoor media owner, because that means they'll be consuming our media as well. So just to kind of summarise that, we found themes of a private screen fatigue coming through, everyone itching to get back outdoors, something to be said around the mindset as well, perhaps in terms of the mindset people might be when they're back outdoors and back in public places doing the things they love in this new different. And we do very much anticipate and hope for a real renaissance for out of home going forward, one of advertising's more traditional and trusted mediums. So I'm just going to wrap up now and just give a quick summary. To build on our two-screen, that is the wrong notes there, so no worries. So yeah, just to wrap up, our research demonstrates that the additional impact advertisers can achieve when combining digital out of home with mobile and social advertising strategies. Attention to your ads on your private screen, your mobile screen, increases by 50% due to the priming and mass reach abilities of the public screen, digital out of home. This increased attention to ads, the 2 + 2 = 5 effect, then filters through across the brand funnel, ultimately making your campaign work its absolute hardest. And what we've done there on the right hand side of that brand funnel is we've just kind of averaged the figures that we've achieved across both case studies. Hopefully going forward with some of your brands at Rapport, we can actually add to that kind of selection of case studies across maybe some different categories as well, which would be great. So we can build out on that, but at the moment we're seeing some really strong results, and hopefully we can add to that going forward as well. So final one for me, and what Jack and I have presented to you today on this two-screen future, we feel is very much the formula for media planning going forward, as referenced in the P² + C = 5 literature, which was launched in September last year, written by Justin Gibbons, who you would have heard from on Monday's session. Just to go through the formula again, P² is about the powerful combination of public marketing and private marketing working together. The C is the creative bridge when you're using the same digital assets across both mediums. And if you do this, you can deliver across 5 key outcomes that all advertisers are striving to achieve. And those are trust, attention, awareness, consideration, and activation. So all things that brands should be and should be striving to deliver, you can achieve through doing digital out of home and mobile together. Now I'm going to hand back to Mike, who's going to wrap up for us.
Brilliant, thanks George. So throughout the week, we've seen various bodies of evidence presented that shows the power of public and private media working together. As a powerful public medium, we've heard how out of home can boost brand trust from digital advertising, how it can prime mobile ads and increase attention. And today we've seen real world examples of digital out of home working hand in hand with mobile to amplify awareness, perceptions and considerations. All of these gains ultimately led to increased conversions. I think the message here is that if you're investing in mobile and social, consider how the same ads can be deployed in public to ensure your online investment is working as hard as it can. And if you want to put it to the test, talk to your rapport planner to see if your digital and mobile campaign meets the requirements for the free research generously offered by George and the team at JCDecaux to measure its effectiveness. So that's it for today, but we have another really interesting session tomorrow at 2:30. It's a session solely focused around creativity, delivered by our Impact Creative team as they bring you the stories behind some of our award-winning campaigns from across the world. Please do join us for what I'm sure will be an inspiring session, helping to unlock the potential of what's possible creatively in out of home. So thank you again to our speakers today, to Jack and George, and thanks to everyone who's joined the session, and we hope you join again tomorrow.